What was the worst movie you have ever seen? Epic movie. The dying fart of the scary movie cash grab era. 2% on Rotten Tomatoes. It should actually be lower. That whole era was trash. Epic movie was easily better than Meet the Spartans. I haven't seen Disaster movie, but it looked atrocious. Edit, not another teen movie is almost a parody of this style of film and it's ducking great. Jack and Jill with Adam Sandler. That movie was truly terrible. The Red Letter Media review of it makes for interesting watching as they essentially expose Sandler as being a conman who stole all the $70 million budget to give to his SNL friends and spent duck all on the movie itself. He's like Robin Hood. Robbing from the rich and giving to the slightly less rich. The worst I've ever seen is the animated Titanic movie with the rapping dog, but I love that film. My most hated movie is Superman III with Richard Pryor. That's the movie that they are going to make me watch in hell. Troll 2 truly lived up to its hype. The director barely spoke English. His wife acted as a translator to the crew. The cast auditioned for side parts and were astonished when they all got the top billing. And one of them was on a vacation from a mental hospital at the time. Exhibit A. Exhibit B. Youtube.com. Exhibit C. Close runner-up, Manos. The Hands of Fate. This one has plenty of pacing issues, which make it more of a chore to sit through. Still, cat fights and Torgo wandering about. Ika is tolerable in its MST3K form. The show cuts away most of the dull stuff and replaces them with various gags. Archie Hall Jr. songs are just memorable. Jupiter Ascending. The CGI was pretty good, but the story and acting were terrible. Most movies will have peaks and valleys. This movie just had valleys. Every time I thought it bottomed out, they figured out a way to make it worse. This is a bad movie I will always defend. It had some interesting ideas and I think it would have worked a lot better if the studio let them make a trilogy rather than cramming 3 movies into one. If nothing else, it was very ambitious. And I will always prefer a bad movie that was ambitious and failed over a bad movie that was just plain bad. I think the moment where I really threw in the towel, interesting ideas aside, was when they tried to force a romance between Tatum and Kunis. 2 people with such a lack of sexual chemistry I thought they might be related. I've seen Tatum in Magic Mike have more sexual chemistry with the chair than he did with Kunis. And that isn't even addressing the dialogue in that scene. I'm more dog than I am human. I love dogs. Itch. Just no. Stop. The Emoji Movie. I felt dumber after watching it. I kinda feel like you asked for it. 50 Shades of Grey. Literally wanted to jump out of the window during the movie just to make it stop. It was so bad. Was watching it with someone so I couldn't just stop it. If you hated the movie, just wait until you hear about the books. He's my very own Christian Grey flavored popsicle. And many other horrifyingly terrible delights. I particularly liked the line about how she blushed so red. Her face was the color of the Communist Manifesto. Because that's definitely the first descriptor people think of for the color red. Giggly. Wow. Everyone was right. It was awful. And not even funny awful. Like The Room. It was the cinematic equivalent of swallowing a chicken bone and having it slowly travel down your throat in a quasi-choking sensation. GR Storm with Gerard Butler. The cherry on top of this crap sandwich is them turning around the space shuttle-like vehicle on its descent to Earth to just go grab the heroes. Hawkeye, 1988. It's on YouTube and has a Eddie Murphy impersonator. Boom mics. Telephone calls where the call is offset. Japanese guys from Texas and the worst acting I have ever seen. And yet they still let him join the Avengers. Food fight. My favorite part was where Doc Brown turned out to be a robot controlled by a miniature Nazi woman who was the symbol of some Nazi food brand. Who then gets killed by MRS. Buttersworth and Mr. Clean and Charlie Sheen and whoever else. Close second to all the times anyone almost banged. Suicide Squad. First movie I didn't enjoy in any way. I didn't laugh because it was bad. I just cringed and wanted it to end. Worst of all, my ex found it an amazing movie and got mad at me for hating it. Suicide Squad was a 2-hour trailer for a movie that never happened. This is probably the best explanation for that movie. Sausage Party. I usually let movies run in the background as white noise if I start losing interest in hopes something happens to get me back into it. Got to the point where I had to turn the movie off. So annoying and no payoff. Nun. Came out in 2017. But isn't the horror film The Nun? It was like watching the build up to an apex in the movie. But the apex never came. If I ever see the director, Chris Dossett, on the street, I'm gonna punch him in the big dig and steal all the money in his wallet. Igor or the Fantastic Four remake. Are the fan for stick or however they advertised it. An action movie with no action. So at least does it have a decent story or character development? Nope. Nothing like that. Also it won't make any sense when we do put stuff in there. The Tourist. Johnny Depp and Angelina Jolie had the least amount of chemistry I've ever seen in a movie. And it was just so aggressively boring. It's the closest I've ever come to walking out of a movie theater. Watched Downsizing. The fairly new one with Matt Damon and People Get Shrunk. Bloody awful. Mean Girls 2. There can only be one Mean Girls movie. Plus, the second movie was literally a recycled version of the first movie with nearly the exact same plot. To say it was hard to watch would be an understatement. The Bratz movie. I was sick and wanted something utterly brainless to distract me while lying on the sofa. It's really bad. Transformers: The Last Night. I've sat through a myriad of bad movies. I've seen so bad it's good movies. Big budget flops. Awful animated films. etc. Nothing comes close to the displeasure I endured while watching Transformers 5. It's one of the most joyless movies I've ever watched. Which is such a disappointment because I watched Age of Extinction as a joke when that one came out. And I laughed my ass off throughout. I was expecting to laugh just a little at the absurdity of it all. But I barely even cracked a smile. I was miserable the entire time. And actually had to clutch my head a few times to reevaluate what I was doing with my life. The story is so dark and convoluted. Series continuity is thrown out the window. The pacing is slow as molasses despite being crammed with jump cuts and quick action scenes. The editing is atrocious. The characters are terrible. The humor falls completely flat. For some reason there's like 3 different aspect ratios. And the cherry on top. It's 2.5 hours long. It's the first movie that made me realize how valuable my time is. And that despite getting in for free, I felt like I was ripped off. The only solace I take in having seen it is that I didn't pay a single penny to watch it. It's the worst movie I've ever seen. And the worst movie I saw in 2017. And I saw the ducking emoji movie. Independence Day 2. Mainly because I was so excited for it, as Independence Day is my all-time favorite movie. When factoring in level of disappointment, probably The Monuments Men. Absolutely stacked cast. Boring. As duck. Like legit nothing exciting happened. Worse though, the Ghostbusters reboot film. I had to watch that because I wanted to be able to criticize as something other than that's a classic. And they shouldn't have tried that. People were shouting that it was some chauvinistic conspiracy that it was panned. Dear God, no. That was just a god-awful film. I don't recall laughing at all. Bad writing set up bad acting. Like, the only bright spot? Whoever did the effects deserved recognition. They were outstanding. I'll give it that. Suicide Squad. It is basically just a 90-minute trailer. And 95% of it is exposition. I cannot figure out how the movie ended up like that. It is bafflingly bad. I don't know about ever. But the worst one in recent memory was Future World. James Franco should not be allowed to direct any more movies. Pearl Harbor. I've seen several other of the usual suspects from this thread. Dragon Ball. Eragon. Battlefield Earth. And while they were awful, they at least attempted to be the thing they claimed they were. Pearl Harbor, by contrast, appeared to be some kind of perverse joke, as if to see how long they could get away with not being the thing in the title before getting fired / hanged. And unfortunately it wasn't long enough. The effects shots were offensively terrible. And the cherry on this sheet sundae is that Michael Bay somehow managed to keep directing movies, including some of the other popular names in this thread. 50 Shades of Black. It was so bad it made my entire family uncomfortable by how dull, unfunny, and stupid T was. All these comments listing bad movies. But y'all haven't been subjected to the psychological torture that is most Christian movies. I challenge you to find me a worse movie than Final, The Rapture. It won't happen. Jupiter Ascending. Never saw that bad an acting in theater before. And let's not speak about the plot. I made the mistake of convincing my family to go to that with me. I haven't lived it down yet. It didn't help that I also couldn't believe that Pixar would make a bad movie a bad original movie and convince them to go to the Good Dinosaur later that year. Edit, was reminded that Cars 2 was a thing. After Earth. The first movie that made me realize movies can be bad. I had a dream where M. Night Shyamalan directed a live-action version of Avatar: The Last Airbender. Thank God it wasn't real. Birdemic is the actual worst movie I've ever seen. The worst movie I've ever seen made by successful, capable people as Battlefield Earth. The worst movie I've seen made by highly praised people as Dogville. I don't remember what the ending was, but I remember that I literally laughed at it. And that was not the reaction Lars von Trier would want. They are all 0-star movies in my book. Skyline. I love sci-fi, but this was just bad. And it had so much potential. Effects. Casting that could have worked, but did not. The story sucked, in my opinion. The Great Wall with Matt Damon might be up there. I was beyond high and watched it on HBO. There was nothing else on and I was captivated with how shitty it was. Not even a Starship Troopers, it's so bad that it's great vibe. The movie is just awful.